Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia, and joining me today is a very special guest from USA Today, the senior fantasy editor. He's also part of the Baseball Writers Association of America, but one of the good ones, I will assure you that. He is a legend in the fantasy sports industry and one heck of a great guy. He's the one, the only Steve Gardner, and today Steve and I are going to break down some players that he is avoiding in 2022 fantasy baseball drafts. And also going to pick Steve's brilliant brain about some draft prepping strategies and how he's going about things in 2022 with the potential for, who knows, missing games or potential rule changes, DH changes, what he learned from last year, so many things. And Steve Gardner, it is just nice to see you, my friend. And coming off that Hall of Fame vote, I got to ask you, did it go the way you thought it was going to?
You know, I was sort of thinking we may not see anybody get in for the second year in a row, but it turns out there was a lot of support for David Ortiz. I voted for David Ortiz, and it's great. He certainly deserves it, in my mind, a no doubt Hall of Famer.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You voted for Sosa too, along with Bonds and everybody.
I did.
Right? I saw your ballot.
I did, and
I agree with that, and I'm glad that you did, because I keep saying, if you're going to talk about all these other guys, why aren't we talking more about Sosa? When you look at the productivity every single year, I mean, he was beloved. He helped bring back baseball. Sure, it's all a little tainted, but nothing is perfect in life. I was fascinated to see that you and I were on the same page in that one.
Right, exactly. I mean, how soon we forget, or how easily we forget what a captivated nation we were of baseball fans, and even beyond baseball too. It expanded to, I mean, my kids in elementary school knew who Sammy Sosa was and Mark McGwire was back in 1998. And, you know, I didn't push baseball on them. You know, I let them, you know, learn on their own. But no, it was the feel-good story for years and years. And only when it sort of ended poorly in Chicago with Sosa, that's where the goodwill started to drop off. But I mean, my goodness, I mean, he was so good for such an extended period of time, one of the faces of baseball, and just the joy that he played the game with. You can't forget that. And the way that I looked at him, at Bonds, at Clemens, before Major League Baseball started testing and laying down punishments for testing positive, Major League Baseball was just as complicit as the players were for the steroid era, if you want to call it that.
It feels incongruous to me that the commissioner who oversaw that era is in the Hall of Fame, but the great stars aren't. That's always where I struggle with it right now, personally. And, you know, it's we got a lot of, fantasy baseball. I was going to say real baseball to get to, but we don't. We got a lot of fantasy baseball, which is real to all of us. It's very real to and dear to our hearts.
Real to me,
but
damn it.
It is real to me, damn it. And I feel like there's a part of me too that, I remember just like you, Sammy Sosa running out there with the flag and everybody going crazy. And there are these moments there and they matter. And I just, I think it's kind of sad that now the buck's been passed to the players. And I think the players will react to it and vote them in. Do you get that same kind of feeling?
Well, I mean, it's one of those where I think that the committee that takes on these players, the Today's Game committee and the Veterans Committee and all that, I mean, it's made up some of players, some of historians, some of retired managers and front office personnel. And I think a majority of them want to see the hall stay small and don't want to, expand it unless, they're buddies with somebody. That's what I don't get. I mean, there's 16 people on those committees, and to get 2/3 or 3/4 of those votes is a lot easier than persuading 3/4 of 400 some baseball writers. I don't know. It's
Yeah, I'll never understand
there are a lot of problems.
The journeyman player who gets the one vote from his buddy, and it's a nice gesture, but I don't think it's very professional. It's a weird thing. It's a weird line, I think, to cross there.
Yeah, we got a lot of things we could discuss.
Well, I'm voting for you for the Hall of Fame.
Well,
I can tell you right now. I mean, you're a Hall of Famer anyway. We all know that in FSWA. You're a big deal, as we know, and congratulations on that honor. And Steve, you've also got the big issue of USA Today's Fantasy Baseball preview probably coming out any minute now, I assume.
It's
right?
Actually it's coming out at the end of the month. So
okay.
Just as we get ready for what we hope is spring training, putting all the capsules together, working with some great folks from Baseball HQ and elsewhere, and looking forward to getting that all put together while while the Olympics and Super Bowl and everything are going on.
Just a few things.
Just a couple of things going on. So,
all right, before we get started here and talk about the players to avoid, which is very important, it's great to identify the players that you love, that you're high on, but also, even more importantly, some of the guys that you really don't want a part of, or maybe you don't want at their current ADP. I want to remind everybody at FantasyPros.com/draftwizard right now, the draft simulator for 2022 is open for business, which means you can go mock your brains out. Start your drafts right now. You can do a draft in 10 minutes. It's unbelievable. You can revert picks and pick again if you don't like the way the team is going. Boy, I wish that feature was available sometimes in real life, Steve Gardner. But I'm telling you right now, that draft simulator is what you want. And if you head over to FantasyPros.com/draftwizard, it's the perfect way to start getting prepped, start to understand the ADP, start to understand, where the values are in some of these early drafts that are going on, whether it's best ball, whether it's dynasty, redraft, it doesn't matter, because that's what the Draft Wizard gives you. It gives you all the opportunity to customize the mock draft you're doing for whatever league or leagues you're participating in 2022. So once again, head over to FantasyPros.com/draftwizard and get your mock draft on right now. Let's kick things off here. And Steve, I know these names ahead of time, and I'm excited because some of these names are pretty big, and some of these names we're going to have some spirited debate, and some I could not agree more. So let's kick things off here. Who's number one on your list of players to avoid in 2022?
Okay. Number one for me, and I say this with the utmost respect.
You sound like Ricky Bobby now. You're like...
Exactly. But no, last year, I was one of the people, and I think one of the things that I got right last year, maybe one of the few things, but I was early on the Shohei Ohtani train because, we got a little glimpse of him early in spring training when he was hitting and he was pitching, hitting home runs and throwing 100 miles per hour. And for me, that was all I needed to see to say, okay, this guy has been a bust of sorts. You can't really... you couldn't really take his value and use it fully in both of his skills. This year, it may not matter. He may be great in both of them. And he was an early pick of mine, one of my early columns for Fantasy MVP last year for just that reason. What if he put it all together? Well, he did. And folks who had Shohei Ohtani were rewarded handsomely. I think what that shows is, how hard it is to do, and even harder to repeat. And for that reason, I'm seeing Shohei Ohtani's value, his ADP in the first round. And I think every player has a price or has a slot where they become a good pick. I don't see any drafts where I'm going to be able to draft Shohei Ohtani this year because he is going to be overvalued. So many things have to go right for him to do anything close to what he did last year, even though I don't think his skills are that much worse after a year. It's just that everything came together so well a year ago.
I could feel the pain in your voice because you respect the player so much, but you're like, I just can't do it. And that's called good discipline. That's what I always say. Now, I understand too when you're separating the player out, which is something I hate. I hate the two different versions of Shohei Ohtani. I think it's the dumbest thing ever. He's not even a Gemini. I don't even know what sign he is astrologically. But I will tell you this. If he is one single player in your drafts, he might be the most valuable piece that we've ever seen in fantasy baseball, because we've never seen anyone, as long as I've been doing this and you've been doing it longer than me, we've never even come close to anything like this. So this is a fascinating take if you have that one player, especially in a points league or heck, even in just season-long roto. The fact that somebody can contribute to the hitting and pitching categories, that seems like it's worth a lot to me. And I'm still going to make that investment at 16, 80. Like if you're getting an ADP at 16, because there's still that risk, because obviously if you do get hurt pitching, that's difficult because then you're not swinging the bat either, most likely. So that's always the double-edged sword that is the double-edged talent of Shohei Ohtani. But at ADP 16, that's not enough for you right now to buy in. That's too much for you still.
I don't think so. And granted, Joe, that you have to take this with depends on format, because as you said, if you've got a format where you can make daily lineup changes and you can switch him in to where he becomes a pitcher when he pitches and a hitter on the days that he doesn't, then he could be the number one overall player in that type of format. So I'm looking at what, I play most, and that's Roto, and it's weekly lineup changes to
Do you
where
think he
you
should
have
be
to lock him
separated,
in.
or you think he should be deemed one player?
I think he should be one player,
Okay, I
and the
agree.
format, and that's what we do in labor. I mean, you have to make a
Yes.
call. Do you want him to be a hitter this week, or if he possibly gets 2 starts, do you want those 2 starts over his hitting stats for the week? I think that's the way to do it. And if you do, like I said, if you do have a daily league where you can make lineup changes, then he's gold. So maybe put a little asterisk by it.
Well, and every league's going to handle it differently, and different sites
Mm-hmm.
handle it differently too. So that's a little quirk in there as well. But last year in Tout, I drafted him both the hitter and the pitcher because I just wanted Shohei Ohtani. I just
Right.
wanted him, and I think I got him for a combined price of like $23 or $24. The pitcher version was much cheaper. I can tell you that. I know that. But at the same point, I look at him like he's one guy. He should be one player. If you have him, he should be able to be in your offensive lineup, be in your rotation for any week, and you shouldn't have to pick and choose. This is again just my take on it because he's doing that in real life. He should be doing it in fantasy, and I know it's something that we're still wrapping our minds around, but we've had a couple years now, and I think after you win an MVP, we've all got to say, look, we have to make space for this, and I still can't imagine it. Some sites can't even do it, which blows my mind. I'm like, come on, we have a lot of technological know-how. We got to be able to make Shohei Ohtani one man and make him whole. For goodness sake. All right, let's get to another player. Who's number 2 on your list of players that you're avoiding in 2022?
All right, this one also a guy that I really enjoy watching play, Marcus Semien, and great year last year. I mean, just ridiculous. If you had Marcus Semien on your team, you probably were a championship contender. And then to top things off too, this year he's got dual eligibility at second base and shortstop. But the fact that he's leaving the Blue Jays, he's going to Texas, where it is not as hitter friendly. We've seen the new Globe Life Field more pitcher friendly, it seems like, in its short history. So when you combine those factors, people are still going to look at last year's stats no matter what, and they're going to jump off the page. And I think he's going to be overvalued again this year, and is not going to be able to live up to that.
Right now, his current ADP is 27 in the consensus over at FantasyPros.com. Now, the round there, the same players, you're talking about Starling Marte, Manny Machado, Cedric Mullins. Is Semien behind all those guys, in your opinion?
They are. I mean, they're ahead of him.
Okay.
And just I expect a little bit of regression. And again, you don't know how he's going to adjust. He adjusted just fine going to Toronto. And Toronto had to adjust throughout the entire season last year. But again, the hitting environment was friendly for wherever he was playing at home last year for the Blue Jays. And it's not as much. And Texas is not as potent an offense, even with the offseason additions that they've made, as the Blue Jays were last year.
Well, that is the big hang up for me, is that Toronto lineup was so good. It was so much protection. And he struggled mightily in April. Remember how everybody wanted to trade Marcus Semien in April? And I know on this show, we kept telling everybody, go buy him. Anyone who wants to get rid of him, go buy him.
Good.
Because I keep going back to the 2019, which is the real breakout. And I put a lot of stock in 2019. I guess my question to you, Steve, is how much stock do you put into 2019 breakout and then last year's superb numbers, and then factor that in with 2020, which was a disappointment, but again, a strange year because of COVID, because of all of that? I mean, is he the player that's closer to what you saw pre-2019, or the player you've seen really 2 of the last 3 seasons, which is an exceptional one?
I think he's closer to the player that we've seen the last few years. And when we talk about some draft tips, we'll talk about a little how to weigh those seasons that we've seen, how remarkably different 2019 was from 2020, 2020 from 2021. But I still think he's a very good player, and he could possibly be, for me, a 3rd rounder, a 4th rounder, something like that. But I just have a feeling that he's going to go before I'm going to have a chance to pick him in straight drafts.
That's fair. Would you agree also too, in any auction format, would you be, do you think he's going to come at a slight discount because people won't believe wholeheartedly, and then does he become a strange value, or do you think people are going to pay a premium on his draft dollar because of what he did last year?
I think, in an auction format, when you've got somebody who's dual eligibility and the freedom that gives you, you can pay a premium for that. And I I would imagine that he's going to go still reasonably high. He's still, I think, a fabulous offensive player. Even runs a little, which you like that. So I won't say that his value is going to tank or anything like that, but I don't feel like he's going to be able to live up to the standard that he set last year. And I think people are going to look at those numbers and expect him to.
Tell you what, Steve Gardner is coming out of the gate right now, and he's throwing gas right now. He's throwing big players, and there's another big one, too, number 3 on the list. You already got Ohtani and Marcus Semien, and you go to the pitcher here for number 3. Who's that guy?
It's Robbie Ray. And again, expectations have to be sky high. You're Cy Young a winner. It looked like he solved his control issues that had plagued him for the entire year, or his entire career, really, to that point last year. But again, I think the regression is going to come with Robbie Ray and moving again to a different park. Granted, we talked about Marcus Semien thriving in Toronto and Robbie Ray in a pitcher's, in a hitter's park, being able to thrive as well. Even though he goes to a place where you would think it would be better for him as a pitcher. I think switching to a new home, the question is, has he really solved the control issues? Or is it just one fabulous outlier season? One of the things that I look at, Joe, is his left on base, his strand rate was one of the highest in the majors last year, which to me screams regression. I think it was above 80, close to 90%. Wow. I mean, that's ridiculous. And so I don't think that he's going to be able to certainly duplicate that. And the control, I think, to me, is still an issue. And I loved Robbie Ray just for the strikeout potential alone back when he was with the Diamondbacks. And then putting everything all together last year kind of validated that opinion. I don't know. Will the league adjust to him? He's still in the American League. Those are some of the questions. And again, I think he's going to be overvalued just because he's got Cy Young winner behind his name.
I tried to do a little homework here on the Robbie Ray one too. You brought some good homework. I'm going to bring some too.
Okay, go ahead.
The old adage of the late blooming lefty, right? Which we've seen in Major League Baseball many a time, right? And I'm going to go back to a guy who bounced around a little while and then found it with the Florida Marlins at the time and then carried it over with the New York Mets, Al Leiter, who struggled with control mightily. Obviously, we recall the guy used to walk 100 guys a year, very Robbie Ray-esque, but then he started to fix that a little bit, limited enough, pitch around things, pitch smart, got the strikeout total up to the 200s a couple times. Could this just be the path of Robbie Ray, that he was one of these late blooming lefties, and are we set up for maybe a 5-year run like Al Leiter had with the Marlins and Mets that was pretty good in terms of fantasy?
Absolutely, that could be the case. And, you think of another guy, maybe around that same time frame, Randy Jansen was ridiculously wild before he was able to corral that, and then just became unstoppable later on in his career. So it's definitely possible. This, I guess you could say, could be a pivotal year for Robbie Ray to validate what he did this past year.
Those wacky lefties, Steve.
Oh, not me. I'm a
watch
righty. Out for him.
I'm right-handed. I peaked years ago, so I can't even worry about that. All right, let's go to another guy on your list.
So I wouldn't know what that feels like.
Still waiting for the Steve Gardner peak, which is astounding because the work's been pretty good, Steve. I got to tell you, the work's been pretty good. Let's go to number 4 on your list here of 10 players that you're avoiding in 2022 fantasy baseball drafts.
Again, another pitcher, and again, another guy that I really like and came through last year, Freddy Peralta. And the one thing about Freddy Peralta has always been a question, can he give you the innings? Last year, career high, 144 and a third. But durability, I think, is still a concern. He was able to get close to 200 strikeouts in those 144 innings, so you still got the volume. But the question is, last year at this time, the question with Freddy Peralta was, okay, number one, can he stay healthy? He proved that. But he was messing around, changing his slider, and was basically revamped that in the winter leagues. And it was ridiculous. He was having so much success, and he leaned on that this past season and had tremendous success. The question is, now that the league has gotten a chance to see that, does the league react to it? Does it adjust to it? I think that's one of the things that you have to worry about with Freddy Peralta. So again, talent unquestioned. He's been able to strike out batters even without a whole lot of velocity compared to others. But will he be able to do that again this season and stay healthy? I have my questions, and so that's why I'm kind of shying away from him.
I got to ask this question. With that same logic, last year, you would have missed out on Corbin Burnes, right? Could we have copy and paste that same thing that we're saying about Freddy Peralta right now that we said about Corbin Burnes, and look what Corbin Burnes did? And I'm saying this as a guy who has regret that he didn't have more shares of Corbin Burnes last year. I had all the shares of Freddy Peralta, so this one kind of hurts me in the heart either way that you answer it. So I'm just kind of curious, is because of what we saw last year with those Brewers pitchers, right? And what we've seen from Woodruff, another guy probably could put in that thing like, well, can he really hold up over a full season? I mean, these guys as a unit have really kind of bucked that trend. I know everybody's an individual, but with that mindset, he's at 47 right now in terms of ADP. Robbie Ray's at 37. Both of those guys kind of out for you at that ADP, or do you think that if you're going to risk one of them, would you rather wait 10 spots, wait another round, take a Freddy Peralta as opposed to a Robbie Ray, or vice versa, because Robbie Ray's at least shown you he can go full innings?
Yeah, I think my general draft strategy, Joe, is probably I'm taking a hitter in those spots regardless.
Sure.
I may take a pitcher, one of the ace pitchers, first, second round turn or something along those lines, and then wait a while for pitchers. So at that point, I think I kind of want a little more security, and you get that with hitters in rounds 2, 3, 4, and maybe you can start thinking about backing up that ace in round 5 or 6 or something like that. Just, talking in general terms. Again, I really want to nail like those first 4, 5 picks to give me that solid base, and then I can do so many different things going forward after that.
I could not agree more, and I'm sure as we get to the draft tips section of the show today, that's going to be one that I think Steve and I are going to hammer home, because I think we absolutely see eye to eye there. So again, the big names continue: Freddy Peralta, Robbie Ray, Semien, Ohtani. Give me another one that you're staying away from this season.
Okay, and this is a guy that burned me last year because I was
It's personal now.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think I've learned a lesson in that Adalberto Mondesi, for all of his talent, could be a game changer in terms of stolen bases, can also provide power. He's been injured so often, and those flashes of brilliance have been in only short bursts. I mean, he may have in the 2020 season, when we only had 2 months of a season and he had the September that he had, he may have won people championships, and they could be back. I don't care. I'm back all in because he did it for me that year. I last year said, I want a piece of that. And even though he was injured to start the season, I was willing to wait and see what happened because I felt like the payoff was so great. I don't think so. And the one thing I think that really seals it for me is that as a shortstop, he does have, extra value getting the steals and power from that position. As a third baseman, I don't know that he does. And he doesn't have any dual eligibility this year. He played exclusively at third base last year, so that lumps him in with a completely different player pool. I just don't think, you could get steals from third base. That's kind of a value pick per se. But I just don't think that, knowing what we know about the constant injury issues, and they were varied. There wasn't just one thing. There were multiple different injuries last year. I'm going to be out on him this year.
Well, I'm with you. I was out on him last year, thankfully.
Yeah.
My co-host at the time, Dan Harris, not so much. We had many an argument about that. He kept saying, don't worry, he'll play 50 games and he'll steal 70 bases. and I understand that logic, especially in an age where we see stolen bases just drop off precipitously, right? Like 4 guys stole 30 bags last year. I mean, it's really, the game has significantly changed. So even at the ADP right now of 70 overall, even with that category being so difficult in roto leagues to really fill, that's just too rich for your blood still, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'd much rather build, and we all say this, with a bunch of 15 to 20 steal guys.
Guys who do everything well.
Yeah, exactly. But everybody else loves those guys too. So it's hard. You got to find your steals somewhere. I just think I'm going to look somewhere other than Mr. Mondesi this year.
Give me a team full of Cedric Mullinses or
Boy.
I'm not even sure what the plural is. I want all of them. And then I'll be a happy camper. All right, so Mondesi's on this list, and I agree with you, man. It's just, even for that one category, I can't do. If a guy doesn't play, what can you do? And also the batting average has been a problem, too, so you're sacrificing things. The power has been spotty at times in his career.
And
he's not a complete player, Steve,
And too, Kansas City has Bobby Witt Jr.,
That's right,
who needs a place to play. And Nicky Lopez was fantastic defensively at shortstop last year. Don't think he's going to move. Mondesi could get squeezed out of the starting lineup. And then
That's my concern, too. Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up. I thought I was being hyperbolic when I've mentioned that earlier to people. I think this is a guy that could absolutely, end up somewhere else potentially, which, again, that's an unknown. That could be a good thing. But then again, what if he ends up in some other weird situation where he's not an everyday player potentially? That's a problem. So,
and they don't let him run. I mean, Kansas City, we know they like to run. Other teams, not so much.
That's a great point. What if the philosophy is very different and they just, wow. Yeah, at 70, then that becomes a very dicey investment overall. All right, let's go to another guy on your list who's next on the hit list, or should I say the miss list? For Steve Gardner this year.
I'm going with a guy. If you got Carlos Rodon last year, you got him for very cheap, and you got great production. You got a no-hitter out of him. A fantastic year. Problem is, he's a free agent, and talk about an injury history. He's got an extensive one. I think the telling thing about Rodon for me is the White Sox last year signed him after, they released him, brought him back on a minor league contract. It worked out great for them. He'd been in their system for, since they drafted him in the first round. So they knew him and his health history extensively. They took a chance on him. And then after the great season that he had, they decided they weren't going to bring him back. They didn't want to re-sign him. To me, that says, when a team that knows you as well as they can possibly know you, and you had a season like you did, there's got to be something that's making them, forcing them to make that decision or spurring them to make that decision. And if they didn't want Carlos Rodon back when they are a World Series championship contender, in my mind, that says something. So I'm going to go ahead and stay away from him for that reason and others as well, but primarily for that one.
It feels like, the White Sox certainly had more disappointment than they had joy with their investment in him over the years, which is unfortunate. So maybe they would just figure that they were going to Costanza and get out on a high note with him and just say, maybe it doesn't get any better than this, and we're going to pay for last year. We're going to, we're still paying for all the years that you didn't do anything. And I think that is a real question for them, especially since they've got a lot of these young players that they've already locked up and they're trying to build in a specific way. It makes a lot of sense to me. He was so good last year at the beginning of the year. Right. It was almost too good to be true. Of course, you knew it was going to be some regression in the second half, and there was. The overall numbers still ended up in a pretty good spot. 185 strikeouts, 36 walks, but he did just throw 133 innings. And I think that's the problem is how many innings are you going to get out of this guy? And what's interesting to me, he's at 104 overall. At 105 is Justin Verlander. So if those two guys were on the board, which way would you go? Would you go with Verlander coming off the surgery or Rodon coming off the, oh my God, Carlos Rodon finally had a good year?
I think I would go with Verlander, to tell you the truth. And that's, even assuming that Rodon has a home and signs somewhere, I still think I would go with Verlander just because of the extensive track record of staying healthy, for the most part, and delivering the goods. And he's still pitching on a pretty decent team too.
All right, let's continue on. And I think the next guy you're going to talk about is another big market player. So go ahead, lay it on me. Who's another player you're avoiding in 2022 drafts?
I will lay on you Gleyber Torres. And this is, I think, is pretty much a no-brainer. I don't know that people are bumping him way up the way that they were after that 2019 season when he hit 38 home runs. That season is not coming back. And especially, do the Yankees have a place to play him? I think that's the question. Right now, they don't have a shortstop. So does Torres move back to shortstop? If that happens, does he get pulled in games later for his defense, which has gotten, it seems, progressively worse? They need to find a place for him. If he goes to second base, what happens to DJ LeMahieu? And I think one other thing that can't be overlooked, Joe, is that Gleyber Torres, when he was at his home run hitting best, and that's what we want him for,
Right.
infielder that hits a lot of home runs and drives in runs on a good team. He did an awful lot of damage at Camden Yards in Baltimore, where they have moved the fences back 30 feet this year in left field and left center field. So those home runs aren't coming back either. And,
well, the Baltimore pitching helped a little in that year too. I'm pretty sure
they did. Yes,
there's
indeed.
pretty bad stuff going on.
But
it was definitely a Dylan Bundy 7 ERA kind of a mindset there. But this one's puzzling to me because I gave him a pass in 2020 because I was like, well, it's 2020, strange seasons, stopping the start. I think a lot of people didn't know what to, and rightfully so, did not know what to make of players who struggled in 2020. So I was all in last year on Gleyber Torres. It did not work out. It was terrible. And he is still a young enough player, but I'm looking at the ADP right now, and he is at 155. He's going around the same spot as guys like Ke'Bryan Hayes, Akil Baddoo, Alex Verdugo. So in your mind, are those guys better investments than Gleyber Torres currently where he's at in this stage of his career?
I think it depends a lot on what you're looking for and how you build your team. I mean, Baddoo obviously can give you speed. Torres is not going to do that. Baddoo will hit a few home runs.
Yeah, he gave you 14 last year, which is actually a little surprising. I had to go back and look and say, wow, 14. I forgot about that.
I will have to stand corrected there then. But,
believe me, I was stand corrected first because I couldn't believe it either. I look back, I said, oh, he did steal 14 bags last year, but 9 home runs. Therein lies the problem in 127 games. That's when you're stealing more bases than home runs. That's a bad situation there for Torres.
Indeed. So yeah, I think those other guys, I would probably lean toward them and fade Torres. Even though again, I think he may have the dual eligibility, but
yeah, he does still.
It's
which is valuable.
Again, I think the value is going down.
All right, so Rodon and Torres have added to the list. Speaking of Baltimore and moving the fences back, you got an Oriole on your list.
Yeah,
so who's the next guy?
I hate to do that too because I'm an Orioles fan and I grew up an Orioles fan. And Ryan Mountcastle, I think, is one of the guys that's going to be hurt the most by those fences going back. He pulls 40% of his balls in play, had a very high whiff rate and chase rate last year, which I think, his first full season in the major leagues. I think now pitchers have an idea what to do and they can adjust to him, and they have done a very good job of that. He's in, I looked it up, the 12th percentile in whiff rate and the 3rd percentile in chase rate. So those are not numbers you want to be that low in. And 22 of his 33 home runs did hit 33 home runs, which is great. But 22 of them came at Camden Yards. And so you move those left field fences back. That's right where his power is. He hit some to the opposite field and straight away. But again, 22 out of 33 at home, it's going to hurt him. And I think that, for that reason, I'm going to be fading Ryan Mountcastle as much as I would love to see him do well and the Orioles rise up again one of these days.
It feels weird to make any change to that ballpark because it is such a glorious place to watch baseball. I almost don't want anyone to touch it, but how do you feel about the change to that ballpark that they're making?
I think it's dramatic. I think that's the one thing.
Dramatic.
I wouldn't mind it so much if it were 10 feet or 15 feet. 30 seems like a lot. And, it's going to be, obviously, one thing it will do, if you're John Means, you're probably not too upset about it because, he gave up his share of home runs last year. And as a left-handed pitcher, he sees a lot of right-handed hitters, and he can say, I've got Cedric Mullins out there in center. Go get him, Cedric. Hit those fly balls wherever you want and let him run it down. So on the flip side, there's something good. I think from an Orioles standpoint, not to get too far off track, but it was such a hitter's park that it was so tough to develop pitchers. We talked about
100%.
Orioles pitchers, Dylan Bundy and all those guys earlier. And it was so hard because you get demoralized when you're giving up those home runs and you exit with, 7 runs in 3 2/3 innings, and 6 of them came on 2 pop flies to left field that wouldn't have been out in, maybe one other park in the major leagues. So I think overall it's a good idea. It doesn't take away any sidewalk space for Boog's Barbecue. So I'm glad about that.
Well, that's the most important thing. Let's be honest.
So,
I mean, they'll never touch my barbecue, and that is a fun joint. I gotta say, I've been to that ballpark many times. It's certainly a good one. I agree with you wholeheartedly. The ballpark certainly was a factor, but also the way that they kept bumping these guys. Like Gossman would be in the bullpen for 2 weeks, then he would be a starter, then he would be a AAA, and then he would be up again as a starter, and then it just felt like they never let these guys just figure it out. And then the next thing you know, you see like Arrieta had a small window where he was good there with the Cubs, but still he was very good.
Right.
Dylan Bundy, small window, but Gossman seems to be the one too who was that can't miss guy too. And now he seems to have figured it out later in his career too. And it's got to be frustrating as an Orioles fan when you see those pitchers have success, and even at different levels of success, but success nonetheless in other places.
Absolutely. And, I think that's where, maybe this is being done a little bit with, some of their prospects, Grayson Rodriguez in the minor leagues. You don't want them to just be completely demoralized once they get to the major leagues and not be able to develop. And you wonder if that might have been, part of the problem, or at least some small contributor to those guys not having the success they have elsewhere.
All right, who is next on the list? Who's number 9 of the guys you're trying to avoid this year in 2020?
All right, Frank Schwindel, great story last year, and the numbers that he put up with the Cubs were amazing. But again, only a small sample, relatively speaking. 222 plate appearances with the Cubs, and I think you look at what he did, from a journeyman in the minor leagues. I mean, he had a long minor league career, a couple of cups of coffee. He's 30 years old. He's not like some young prospect that came up. And to go out and slug .613 as a Cub after the trade, which, for the entire season, there was one person in all of Major League Baseball qualified, for the batting title, who had a higher slugging percentage than Frank Schwindel did as a Chicago Cub. And that was your MVP in the National League, Bryce Harper. So, I mean, that's the kind of level that he produced.
.613 is a high number. Let's put it that.
Yes, indeed. I don't know, how that's going to be, especially the Cubs seems to me, are tearing down that team instead of building it up. And so I think he's going to be somebody that people will look at the numbers again from last year and say, oh, wow, that's great. He broke out last year. Then let's see what he can do this year. I'm kind of skeptical about that.
Now he's going all the way at 213 in ADP. That's pretty far down. So we're talking about, here's a perfect, for instance, there's another guy coming off a huge year, right? But a journeyman, I would say, major leaguer, Adam Duvall. Would you rather have Adam Duvall at 212 or Frank Schwindel at 213? Who do you believe in more?
Wow. I think I'd have to say Duvall, I mean, we don't know where he's going to be either, right? He's a free agent,
right,
as well.
That's another one we're waiting on.
That's a theme running through today's discussion. But well,
it's tricky because I'm with you. The minor league track record is not terrible, but it's extended, which always makes you wonder, why wasn't this guy up earlier? Why didn't this guy get a shot? And sometimes just certain guys aren't liked in organizations, or sometimes it takes, somebody to pop somewhere else. If you go back and look at the minor league track record of Schwindel, when he goes over to the Detroit system there, it feels like starting to turn things around, and then you get to Oakland, and of course, you could always take numbers in Vegas with a grain of salt there. In 2021, 318, 362, 630. So he carried it on all year. So what he was doing in Oakland in the minor leagues in 2021 carried over into the major leagues, but it feels like players who are in the minor leagues this long always have a hole in their game, and it's only a matter of time before it gets exposed the more that they play. Is that your big problem with Schwindel?
I think so, yeah. And to develop a track record, you need to have had that major league success. And at age 30, I don't know if he can get better, to tell you the truth.
No, it makes sense. Going back to Mountcastle too, I wanted to ask this question because he's going at 111. And Mountcastle is a young player. I think a lot of people will hear about the ballpark thing and not, some will overcompensate for it, some will
That could be.
undercompensate. And then you've got players going around there. Jared Walsh, who I'm a big fan of. That's some good value power, I think. Franimal, the Franmil Reyes, Kyle Schwarber, all are in 5 picks or so of Ryan Mountcastle. How would you rank those guys? Walsh, Reyes, Schwarber, Mountcastle. Is Mountcastle 4th in that grouping because of the ballpark factor?
I think so. I love Jared Walsh too, but he
Yeah, me
was
too.
terrible against left-handed pitching last year. That concerns me, and I think he still has plenty of time to turn that around. But that is a concern there. Franimal, you know, it's
I
interesting to
love the
me.
Franimal. I don't know
I
why.
do
You
too.
know why? It's the DFS guy in me that can't get enough of him because you see him out there and you're like, well, if I play him and he hits home run tonight, I'm going to win some money. You just know that. And I
Uh-huh.
think that's not always the best practice to then carry that over into your season-long thought process. But, the dude goes up there and he hits bombs. I mean, if you're looking for cheap late power in the hundreds, I mean, he's right around there like the 120 range.
Yeah, and I mean, and even in points leagues, I've got an auto new league that I was looking at, last year's stats and the points that they accumulated. He really surprised me in how well he did, relative to some of the others around that spot. So I, I'd- I'm excited because you wonder, what kind of potential could still be unlocked there. That's
Yeah.
something to dream on.
Our good friend Steve Gardner is an overachiever, so he gave us really 11 names, one of which is a current Dodger, one is a former Dodger question mark right now. So you've got Max Muncy and Kenley Jansen. Those were the 2 last guys.
Right.
So break them down for me. Why are you avoiding each one of these right now? Jansen at 106, Max Muncy at 112 in terms of ADP currently
Yeah.
consensus.
And that's right. I did skip over Max Muncy, didn't I? I'm
I always bring it back.
Beautiful.
I always bring just like Blues Traveler. I always bring the hook back every single time.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think.
And if you get that reference, you grew up in the 90s, folks. There you go. All right.
So yeah, Max Muncy. I was, very hopeful that his off season would go well. It's still the reports that we're getting, and granted, we're not getting detailed reports, but still seems like the elbow is bothering him. And whereas I would have him certainly, in that top 100, top 75, maybe. We don't know what his health situation is, and I think that for me, despite all the pluses, a fantastic year last year. Again, multiple position eligibility. I think that injury thing is really gnawing at me. I want to see him healthy before I start, going back all in.
All right. There you have it. Just to recap the names: Shohei Ohtani, Marcus Semien, Robbie Ray, Max Muncy, Freddy Peralta, Adalberto, Mondesi, Carlos Rodon, Gleyber Torres, Ryan Mountcastle, Frank Schwindel, and Kenley Jansen, all players that Steve Gardner is avoiding.
Yeah, Jansen's
in
the bonus.
2022 drafts.
As
Jansen's the bonus. And can he evolve and get outs with lesser stuff, in your opinion, or do you think he's just kind of hit his expiration date, which is a good run, let's be honest?
I think it's a little of both. But what worries me is that if he goes somewhere else, and doesn't re-sign with the Dodgers, I don't know that the Dodgers are willing to, number one, pay the asking price because he's going to want multiple years. And I think they'd rather bring back Clayton Kershaw if they had to bring one of those 2 franchise icons back on a 1-year deal or something like that, rather than pay multiple years to re-sign Jansen. And, Blake Trinan was so good last year too.
Right.
I think they are more than comfortable just turn it over to him and say, you're our closer, go get him. And which is a shame because of all the history that the Jansen's had in a Dodger uniform. I just think it's one of those business decisions.
I think Kershaw's going to sign with Texas. I really do.
Do you?
Go home. I do. I mean, they're throwing money around like it's water. Yeah. I mean, like, why not, right? Go home again. You've already kind of had your Dodger run there. Can't get much better than that if they want to move on. And, why not? Go have some fun. Go hang out with your old teammate, Corey Seager. All right, let's talk to you about some preparation stuff going into this year. And I know it's very difficult because we're still waiting for everybody to get together and figure out what they have to figure out in order to play baseball this year. And I feel like we're most assuredly not going to get the normal pitchers and catchers time. I'm hopeful, or cautiously optimistic, I should say, we're going to get spring training, but I know that is also a tenuous discussion at the very least. how does that impact your thought process in terms of how you are drafting in early drafts? Because of, once again, we're in uncharted territory like we were in 2020, are you putting more of a premium, even more so, on hitting than pitching, because you don't know how people are going to react to the timetables and how they have to ramp up and how quickly they can do so? Is hitting going to be the key to 2022 drafts?
I think to a degree, yes. And I think too that we are going to be seeking, or maybe we should be seeking a lot more safety and not going for those home run picks, especially if we don't get a full spring training. I mean, we saw how, the shortened season impacted the performance that year, how it impacted performances the following year, in 2021. I think, if you can possibly get those safe but boring picks, guys that you have a pretty good chance of staying healthy. I think that's the way to go. Building a balanced roster, maybe more so than stars and scrubs, as you may have wanted to in previous years. I think that the risk is going to be the biggest factor in drafts this year if everything plays out like we think and we have a shortened spring training and maybe a delay to the beginning of the regular season. I think how much risk you're willing to take is going to have a huge impact on your success this year in fantasy baseball.
Speaking of offense, it feels like a foregone conclusion that the DH is coming to the National League. I think we all think that. It seems like that's already the one thing that everybody's circled and said, yeah, okay, we agree with that, because pitchers are ridiculous at this point hitting, or trying to hit, I should say. So how does that impact certain players, let's say on the Dodgers? We talked about this last time Casey Bub was on the show. Guys like Justin Turner and AJ Pollock, like guys who now might get some at-bats at DH, and maybe guys who have injury history all of a sudden getting an extra 40, 50 at-bats you weren't used to them getting because they don't have to play the field in the National League. Does that make you rethink some of those kind of players that typically you might shy away from, but with the DH in the National League, that might maybe kind of rejuvenate them a little bit in terms of the amount of productivity they can give you?
It might. And I think we got a little bit of a glimpse of that, Joe, in the 2020 season when we did have the DH. I mean, we had, I think of Dominic Smith as the classic example of somebody on a National League team who probably wasn't going to see the lineup every day, but get a chance to be in the lineup because of the DH and flourish because of that regular playing time. I mean, that's one positive. The injury-prone guys could be another. Could be also that Kyle Schwarber, for instance, somebody who's a free agent right now, finds a much better landing spot in the National League if that's open now to all of those teams. To be able to flourish in an everyday role there and not have to play on defense every day. So I think it does open up a ton of extra possibilities, and we can take, a little bit of a closer look on maybe those injury prone guys and possibly, have them stay in the lineup, even more than, they maybe we thought originally.
Now, on the pitching side of things, I feel like you and I are on the same page almost, where we'd rather kind of buy in bulk. Like, we just want a bunch of guys. Am I getting that right from some of our conversations? I feel like
yeah.
It's nice to have the premium guy, but give me a bunch of rotation of guys that I feel good about, 3 starters as opposed to just like with one guy and then I'll figure it out later. When you're trying to either create your draft strategy or create budgets and things like that, how are you factoring in that approach, but also how are you factoring the limitations now that are on starting pitchers? And do you start to go for some of these guys who are just relievers as opposed to closers and, have these elite strikeout totals? Do you just want the good arms like the Michael Kopechs of the world and just say, I'll figure it out later, just give me Michael Kopech? How are you looking at 2022 as a player pool when it comes to pitchers as a whole, and what's your kind of general approach this year?
Yeah, I think, as we were talking earlier, if you can get somebody to anchor your rotation, get one of those, the Garrett Coles or Corbin Burnses, who you can pretty much feel comfortable will make 30 starts in a season, then you've got a lot more room to play with other pitchers down the road in those middle rounds. And you're right. I think we have a lot of pitching metrics, and we can look at, FIP and Sierra and, all of those. We can look at now there's metrics for command and things like that. And we can pick out by the numbers which guys we kind of like. I think you're just going to have to get an awful lot of them, though. That's the one thing, and buy in bulk and use a bunch of late round picks on some of those flyers with good skills, and hope that they get the roles, because there are so few pitchers that are going to pitch 6 or 7 or beyond innings, and pretty much the bulk of pitchers, starting pitchers you'll see, are 5 and dive starters, and it opens up the possibility of getting those middle relief guys that have, great stuff and strike out a lot and have good ratios. It gives them a place on your roster as well. And also, I think, Joe, it's going to allow us to maybe have to speculate more on closers too, because teams aren't going to have, as often the lockdown closers, to the point where they're going to be using maybe high leverage relievers and sharing those save chances.
How do you approach the closer? Are you somebody that likes to get a premium guy and then figure out later, or you just say, no, to heck with all of it, I'll even spend all my fab and just say my fab is for bullpen, let me use the draft to build the things that I want and get the players I want, and relief pitching is something that typically every year it cycles through and pops up. How do you approach the closer position specifically?
Increasingly more, I want to lock down a bullpen. And whether that means getting the Liam Hendricks, who is going to get pretty much all the save chances, or a split bullpen to where it looks like you're going to have 2 guys, an A closer and a B closer. If we can identify those ahead of time, then go ahead and try and get both of those guys. And sometimes it backfires. I mean, the Cardinals last year were all over the place in terms of speculating whether it's Gallegos, is Jordan Hicks going to come back? Who's going to be there? And it ended up as Alex Reyes came in and stole all the saves for 2/3 of the season. So you can guess wrong that way too. But at least in terms of approaches, that's what I'm going to do. Try and lock down a bullpen, just one at the draft, and maybe take a chance on another reliever later on, to fill out the roster. And there will be saves on the waiver wire, and just try and
there always are.
Maybe come up with some and hit on somebody that keeps the job for, you don't even need them to keep it all season, just a couple of months. And if they fall out of favor, keep cycling through.
This is, again, why I always struggle with Roto, because, saves are 3 outs and a win is 5 innings, and I don't see how we could ever think of them as the same thing. It hurts my soul. Remember when we used to also get, 5 pitchers who could give you 1,000 innings combined between the 5? Remember those days? That was like 10 years ago. Oh, that was heaven. How many guys does it take to get 1,000 innings nowadays?
Well, and I'll tell you,
fantasy rotation.
We have to bump down some of the minimum innings requirements, I think, for Roto leagues.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're not able to get
they're just not there.
And with injuries and everything else, you're lucky if you have, even a couple of pitchers on your roster get you 180 innings.
All right, last one for you here. We talked about the guys you don't want. Let's talk about the guys you do. How does Steve Gardner approach his guys? Are you somebody that, I'll go around early, 2 rounds early, I don't care? Or you say, my guys are my guys because of where they're going in ADP, and that's why they're my guys besides their talent? What's the Steve Gardner approach to his dudes?
Generally, I will look for the best players and the best values at the top of the draft. Again, I want security. I want as close as possible as you can get to numbers that you can set and forget. But later on, after pick, I don't know, maybe 100, 150, that's when I will definitely take my guys. I will have favorites, and there will be some guys that end up on multiple teams of mine just because I like them for whatever reason, or they fit with my team especially well. So it's one of those where, you have to take each draft and understand where each draft is going and the flow and everything. But I'm definitely not opposed to guys that I really like. Jared Walsh was one of those guys last year, going ahead and taking them multiple leagues and rolling with them.
There you go. Get your guys. And of course, Steve Gardner, always our guy here. You can follow him on the Twitter machine at Steve A. Gardner. And obviously check out all the great work he's doing at USA Today for all these many years. And obviously at the end of February, as you mentioned, got the big draft kit coming out there, the big guide, everything you need to know there, fantasy baseball. And Steve's doing the Olympics. He's going to have all your curling coverage, all your bobsled stuff. He's doing everything right now. He's amazing.
I'm learning so much about curling right now, Joe.
I love curling. I will, no lie, I will DVR the curling. Love the curling. Can't get enough of it. For years now. Mm-hmm. Years I love the curling. It's like, it's bocce on ice, and I'm Italian, and it's basically the same idea. It's just, just a little colder. That's all. The only difference, instead of yelling things in different languages, just yelling things in Italian. Mm-hmm. That's the only difference. But let me tell you, man, it's always a pleasure talking to you, and I always appreciate how kind and helpful you were to me many years ago when I was first starting out. Steve Gardner gave me notes, and I took them to heart, and I'll never forget that. And I try to pay it forward for everybody who ever asked me anything, any help coming on a show. Man, on those many nights on Sirius XM, when I was by myself, Steve Gardner would pop on with me and spend some time, and I can't tell you just how grateful I have been over the years for your friendship and your camaraderie as a colleague in this industry, which I'm still around. Can you believe it? It's crazy. But Steve, just thanks again for hanging out with us today. Hopefully we'll get you on again maybe before the season starts, and hopefully we have a season sooner than later, buddy.
Very much so. Joe, thank you. The pleasure's all mine. It's great to chat with you and get a chance to sit back and relive some of those memories and look forward to a great future too.
That's right. And labor, don't forget, Steve Gardner runs the labor drafts. That's coming up pretty soon too. So, by the way, I've got a great idea for labor. Yes. I think one year when we draft so early, we should all proclaim 3 keepers from whatever round we want, and then redraft again before the season starts. What do you think of this idea? Because we draft so early in February.
For sure.
What do you think?
That's something to chew on. Not a bad idea. Sounds like
and then say, okay, that's what it looked like back in the day. But now let's see, okay, now you just proclaim the keepers. So you don't even have to input that first league. You just add those keepers in, maybe, I don't know. February, so early. It's so hard, Steve.
Oh, I know. Well, that's not supposed to be easy.
No, it's not. It never is, especially when you're in the draft. All right, that'll do it for us. And remember, everybody, make sure you head over to fantasypros.com/draftwizard to start your draft simulations right now and start mock drafting your brains out. It's a good time. And I'm telling you, the Draft Wizard is the best tool.
Absolutely.
Our people here at... See, even Steve Gardner says so.
I love it. It's invaluable.
Isn't it the best?
Yes.
And it's so quick, it's efficient, and the fact that you can just streamline anything you want in any possible formation you want. And I think that is a thing, too, in Major League Baseball. Everybody's playing in all these different formats and different leagues and different styles. Who's got corner infield, who doesn't. That's why I love the Draft Wizard. You can burn a bunch of drafts at a time. It's Steve was saying too. So fantasypros.com/draftwizard. You got the Steve Gardner endorsement. What more do you need than that? My goodness. All right, that'll do it for me and Steve, but the story of the game goes on. We'll see you next time, kids.